Hi, friends. Host Eric here, host of Talking with Famous People. Tagline of which is actually social media. And we're talking today about MBTI slash socionics slash cognitive functions versus horoscopes. Are cognitive function types basically just the same thing as horoscope types? They've got no more validity than that. And we might as well dismiss typology in the same fashion that we dismiss horoscopology as an amusing entertainment, no meaning or significance. Well, the answer is I disagree with that assertion. I think that there's a significant difference, and I intend today to explain what it is. So, foremost, let's look at a horoscope. A person's horoscope is comprised of one's birth date. The birth date that one has is random. Now, it says, depending on where your suns and moons and planets and shit are, you have varying traits and qualities. The thing is, a complete star chart will inform you of all these varying traits and qualities and all the different moons and all the different blah, 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 many of which are contradictory to one another. So it's a matter of selection bias to determine which type you are. You find those aspects of the star charts that align with you, and you say, these are me, and you say, these are the ones that are dominant in me, and these other ones are the ones that I don't have, more or less. And here's why. You come up with some sort of planet star explanation that's completely unrelated to the thing, and you go, voila, I can't believe how accurate that is. Jesus Christ, wow. These cherry-picked sections of the star chart are exactly right for me. Well, what about the sections that are totally wrong? Oh, well, those ones are obviously not the parts of my star chart that are dominant or ascendant. Okay, well, I mean, I could just put down a description of all the different ways that people manifest and say, okay, oh, you're number 72452? Okay, here are all the different ways people manifest. Now, you pick the ones that are like you. See? I described you perfectly. I didn't describe you at all. You described yourself. The difference between that model and the cognitive function model is that in the cognitive function model, it notes a simple reality, first of all, that is unavoidably true. People pay attention to things, and they pay attention in different ways. So if I'm paying attention to you by having sexual intercourse with you, it's a very different kind of attention than if I'm paying attention to you by asking if you need another cup of coffee. And they're motivated by different types of attention in the human experience realm. The first example would be something of an example of SE. It's taking physical action upon metaphysical realities and or physical realities. The second one is probably FE, could be TE, depends, right? If I'm doing it for reasons to make the other person happy, maybe it's FE. If I'm doing it for reasons of doing my job at work, maybe it's TE. Regardless, the point is those are different manners of attention in the same way that saying, I think we should do this because it's most logically sound is different than saying, I think we should do this because if we don't, Judy will cry. Now, it could be that Judy's crying renders the decision most logically sound, but that has to be established. So those are different manners of attention. We should prioritize everybody feeling good all the time, even when it's illogical, is a different manner of attention to an event in the world than to prioritize be doing what is logical. So if something happens before you in the world, for example, let's say Neptune and I were arguing, and I suddenly flew off the handle and started calling a bunch of homophobic names, stuff like that, and displaying a deep-seated hatred of gays within me. Each person in here would be faced with they would have their attention compelled by that reality, first of all. So the they would pay attention to that, and they'd react to it in a number of different possible ways. How might understand on some level my feelings at the moment, the strong feeling of hatred or something, and he might understand the recipient's feelings, feeling of being attacked, feeling bad, whatever, and may conclude using that judgment mechanism that I'm a bad person. If somebody else were to do that, I would react to it just as strongly as anybody else, but I wouldn't include Neptune's feelings or the person's feelings who are saying that in the equation at all. I wouldn't draw the same conclusion for the same reasons at all. I would say, that's poor Effie. It makes people uncomfortable. It's not a matter of Neptune's feelings. It's a matter of the audience, right? If it serves the audience well, it wouldn't make people feel uncomfortable, then I still have other reasons for opposing it, which is, it's contrary to my fundamental notion of opposition to ontological violence, namely the reduction of individuals to members of groups, and therefore, if I don't argue against it, I'm being hypocritical in some regard, or at least I'm opening myself up to accusations of hypocrisy. I'm always anticipating future angles of attack from others and preventing them from being, and obviating them. That's the verb. And then I would have TI reasons for condemning the person as well, which is stuff related to the basic philosophical position I have that I present as a mission statement sort of thing for the channel. There's nothing wrong with you, and the individual is sovereign, and the individual is the prime unit of humanity that we deal with, is core to everything I do. So obviously I'd have to be consistent, and there'd be the FE concerns. There'd be the TE concerns, I guess, of that kind of shit's going to drive people away. If it were somebody else here, that was doing it, not me. All those sort of matters, but I wouldn't consider their feelings. Some people would argue, probably with a certain amount of validity, that the reason it's necessary for me to react like the other things are long ways around it. But I would argue that we have a moral responsibility to remove from the equation the feelings matter, because even though they would guide us correctly in that example, there are plenty of other examples where they would guide us incorrectly to both utilitarian bad outcomes for feelings long term and for matters of injustice. That justice is a real thing, and injustice is derived from TI understandings of, rights, ownership, obligations, responsibilities, things that are clearly defined. Because if we don't allow ourselves to answer questions of moral agency via a fair and objective metric like discourse, then we guarantee we make the wrong choices. Because we guarantee that something other than who is more correct dictates what we do. And being something other than more correct means being less correct. Being less correct means making mistakes. Making mistakes means consequences. So it's necessarily the case that we have to prioritize the individual in terms of understanding group policy, that the rights of the individual are sacrosanct and must not be stomped upon in order to achieve perceived societal goods. It's critical to remember this because, number one, hubris. To think that we can actually anticipate large-scale act against massive sets of individuals, we can actually anticipate what the impacts are, including unintended consequences, and measure it against a reality where the opportunity cost has already been spent. We don't know what it would be like without this garbage. So it's hard to say. But what we do know is that rights are violated. What we do know is that it is hubris to assume that we can predict these outcomes and we can control a system like that. This ecosystem of human interaction with other human beings, when allowed to function as it ought, and when protected from that which ought not threaten it, namely threats and coercion and violence and stuff like that, then human interaction is a fundamentally merit-based and additive process. It's not zero-sum. We add to each other's life experiences in meaningful ways that add value. When we do work, we create wealth that didn't formerly exist. When we are allowed to do that independently as independent agents without responsibilities beyond those that are our naturally occurring moral responsibilities to not interfere with the rights and lives of others, then everyone is better off. That is simply reality. When we justify coercion by a state, we ignore everything that cognitive functions teaches us. It teaches us that certain manners of attention are appropriate to certain circumstances. We know which manners of attention are appropriate to romantic encounters. It's FI and a bunch of other stuff. But we also know that there's only one acceptable modality for public policy, and that is TI. If you are allowing yourself to advocate inconsistent political positions, if you are allowing yourself to justify some act of coercion with the justification that you can't universalize, then shame on you. Because we all have an obligation to limit discourse to a fair and objective playing field that everybody can compete on. That means TI. That means feelings don't count. That means contradictions eliminate the viability of things. And we parse it down and we learn that we can derive all one. You own your own body. The alternative is that slavery is good. So unless you're advocating for slavery, you own your own body. All rights logically deduced, or can be logically deduced from that, all legitimate rights. And that which cannot be logically deduced from that is not a legitimate right and must not be treated as such. So if we want to treat each other as equals, if we want to not engage in the hubris of assuming we know better for others than they know for themselves, of the hubris of assuming that we are so godlike as to predict both unintended and intended consequences adequately to justify use of coercion on speculation that we can do good for the common, well, then we're guilty of not manning up. Now, of course, everybody's got to hear this before they can know it. But once you know it, then either reconcile your goddamn contradictions or start raising the middle fingers to the welfare state. Okay? We owe it to our natures, our beings, cognitive functions. Carl Jung himself would be very upset with us right now. He'd say, hey, you guys are prioritizing the wrong cognitive functions. Okay? Trust old ENTP Eric. He knows the ways of the world, and he knows how it is. And fuck you, Europe. Don't forget to eat plenty of cheese.